And this week on the Communicators, a discussion of the FCC's proposal to open up the set-top box market to competition and what that might mean for consumers and businesses. Joining us are two guests on different sides of this issue. George Ford is with the Phoenix Center, where he's their chief economist, and Mark Cooper is the research director for the Consumer Federation of America. Mr. Cooper, what do you think about what the FCC has proposed?
We think we need competition in the set-top box market. The 96 Act said we want competition, competition, competition. Some places it's worked, some places it hasn't. This is one place where it really hasn't. And we think consumers would have lower prices and more choices if we got some vigorous competition into that space.
George Ford.
Well, the FCC's NPRM asked the question whether or not the set-top box is competitive. The first question, it said. And actually the first question is there a market for set-top boxes? And the answer really, in terms of what's delivered over the cable network, no, because the set-top box is actually a component of the network. That's the most efficient way to design and deliver cable television service. So it's the cheapest way to do it, the most efficient way to do it, so no market has developed. The companies would prefer a market if it was more efficient to do it that way.
Well, let's bring Lydia Bayud into the conversation as well. She's our guest reporter this week, and she is with Bloomberg BNA, where she covers telecommunications.
Thank you. So to follow up on both of your questions, Chairman Wheeler, in introducing this item, this proposed rule said he wants to open up what's been a closed market and make it more like the market where consumers can buy their own devices, as we have seen with mobile phones, with TVs, and all sorts of other electronics. Do either of you think that there is something similar or different to that analogy that would make it such that this proposal would or wouldn't work?
We think it clearly is the perfect analogy. You have an interface between the device and the network that has been closed, and it's been impossible for people to sell across that interface. It's just like computers or modems or software systems. The Microsoft case was about that interface, and the court said, open the interface and you get competition. We've seen that time and time again. Remember the old telephone market? AT&T used to say, no one can plug a piece of foreign equipment into my network, it'll blow it up. And of course, they were wrong, and we opened it up and we got tremendous competition. So that's the perfect analogy. Open the interface, and we think you'll get a lot of competition and innovation for the device without harming the network.
Well, you look at the set-top box, and rather than making a judgment about whether it is or is not like the other things, look at it and say, well, it's not behaving like the other things, and why might that be? And the answer is it's not like the other things. It's not like a cable modem, which you can buy from Best Buy if you wanted to. It's not like a telephone either, in the fact that these devices are a secure link from the cable's head end to the household, which secures the property that's delivered over that, which is copyrighted content. It also prohibits theft of the signal because it's scrambled. So it's not the same thing by any stretch of the imagination. And it's also a very important part of managing the quality of the network for the cable operator. If you call the cable operator and say your service is down, first thing they do is say, well, let me hit your box and see what's going on. So it's a very different thing, but I think it's worth just asking yourself that rather than trying to convince you of it, is why is it that this is different than other things? Why is this different from a cable modem, for example, where you're perfectly able to buy one at the store and use it, even though only 15% of people do?
Mr. Cooper, what's your response
to? Well, that's what they always say, is that we have to be integrated to protect it, and the answer is the way the order is written, the way the law is written, you will protect the quality, you will protect privacy, you will protect the advertising stream, and letting people connect is exactly what has been the issue with the home recording industry. They wanted to stop VCRs, they wanted to stop MP3 players, they wanted to stop file sharing. They say, oh, there'll be theft. Well, under the copyright laws, they can defend themselves, and they've won all those cases. But the court has never let them dictate technology to protect their copyright. And for us, that's a critical point. They win the court cases, and the marketplace just opens the system up because there's a lot of value in consumer choice there. This is exactly the same thing. It has worked so many times that the question is, should we experiment? The answer is absolutely yes. If it goes wrong, we can close the door. We honestly believe it won't go wrong because of that experience every place else.
George Ford?
Well, it has gone wrong. And the telephone market, you have to remember, the reason that the telephone companies were opposed to the telephone was that the whole system was regulated and the telephone was part of this scheme. And it created an incentive to want to keep the phone as part of the network. So there are significant differences between that experience and the other. You also have to look at who is really opposing the chairman's proposal, and that is the copyright industry. They're very concerned that this program is going to threaten their livelihood. And there's also, what's interesting about this case is that normally when a new company comes along that wants to use video content, for example, when the phone companies began operating in the cable business, or when Netflix came around, is that the copyright industry then had a new customer. Right? I sat down with these guys, we did a deal, we created new things, and so they had an expanded base, a customer base for the copyright products. Now what the FCC wants to do is say, no, Comcast can buy it, and then whoever wants access to that can have it. No compensation. You really don't have to pay a whole lot of attention to the contracts that are written. And so the programmers are thinking, wait, or the program content people are thinking, wait a minute, this isn't really right and fair, and it's really confiscation of our property. And I think really what happens to this whole program is that it runs square into the law, copyright law. The FCC has no authority to implement copyright law, and this is a pretty clear violation of it.
And to follow up on,
That's absolutely wrong. When someone puts an independent third-party set-top box there, it does not erase the relationship between the cable company and the consumer. You don't get it for free. You still have to pay your cable bill. You're paying your cable bill to the cable company. You just don't have to pay the cable company for the set-top box. So there is exactly the same compensation the day after an independent set-top box is put on the line as there was the day before.
That's not true at all. I mean, what these companies want to do is to take the content and do something to make money with it, to make profit with it. Okay, well, you make profit with copyrighted content, you have to compensate the content owner, right? The copyright owner for that. Google isn't in this business to deliver service for free. They want to be in the business so they can monetize whatever information they gather from what the viewer is doing. Well, where does the copyright owner get to play in this game of monetizing the use of this video content? So it's not the same thing. There's something else going on. Otherwise, nobody would be interested in doing it.
so to allay the concerns that the content creators have in this proceeding, do either of you view a way that perhaps as an alternative to what the FCC has proposed in the rule, a Google or any third-party device or app maker could go and negotiate carriage contracts directly with the content providers? Why do they have to go through the pay TV industry?
They may do that too. But that stream that is coming through the cable box, the set-top box today, is going to continue. It is going to be almost impossible for anybody to monkey with that scheme, because that would require rebuilding an entire network to replicate what exists. Now, would they put a piece of advertising in front of the show? Maybe. He thinks they own that. They don't own that. They get all the advertising in the show. Will they give people the ability to move around more quickly? Absolutely. They don't own that ability. So they have their stream of revenue. They put their ads in. Their ads will stay there. And now, anytime someone else thinks of a neat way to place that, to spread it around like the sling box, they hate that. But anyone who tries to think of another way to deliver that content exactly the way they provided it, they get very upset. They say, oh, I could have monetized that for me. That's my money they're taking away. It's not. They made their deal, and other people are innovating and maybe gaining rewards for how they move the content around, but not destroy it. Also, this is a marketplace where there's money to be made in manufacturing that has been monopolized by the cable market power.
So we're already seeing pay TV providers delete or skip over advertisements in the shows now. And is that a concern that they would have with this proceeding as well, as it relates to copyright?
They have a right to defend their interest under the Copyright Act. But what they can't do, shouldn't do, and the courts haven't let them do, is use the Copyright Act, or use the Communications Act, or even the Copyright Act to dictate technology. And so this debate about should consumers be allowed to skip ads? Well, consumers do skip ads. They can turn it off, they can turn the sound off, and now we got some technology that automates that. Is that a radical change? Should that be banned? Well, the Federal Communications Commission has no business being in the middle of the Copyright Act. They've been to court every decade, numerous times, to battle against technology. And the irony is they win their court cases, but they lose the economic war because the courts will not let them dictate the structure and nature of technology in order to protect their interests. And so they work it out. Now, streaming music is the perfect example. That's the majority of the income. They make less money than they did before. They have much more smaller costs than they did before. And so that's the process under the Copyright Act. Remember, the Copyright Act is a balance between the consumer interest in the creative arts and the copyright holder interest in getting enough revenue to continue to create. That's a different balance. The FCC is about communications, not copyright.
Well, I think you pretty much made my point. When you make money using copyrighted content, then you owe the copyright owner money. If it's adding advertisements in addition to the ones that are there, you must pay for that right. Okay? That's what a broadcaster is. A broadcaster gets copyrighted content, sells advertising around it, he makes money doing that, and then the copyright owner comes in and takes his fair share of that money. Okay? So that's exactly the point. You can't do anything. Reorganize the channels, right? Put a nicer front end on it. Anything you do to make money is a violation of somebody else's right if you don't pay them for it. That's what the copyright law is. Okay?
Well, George Ford, wouldn't opening up the market benefit the consumer by having competition where you can buy box A, B, or C?
Well, it wouldn't. The cable operator, the box is a cost to the industry. It is not a benefit. It provides no profit. I mean, you can't take a product like video, which everybody wants, and add to it a set-top box, which nobody wants, and become more profitable. I mean, that's insanity. Okay? So it just has to be there, and they're trying desperately to get out from under it, which goes back to your question, which is by moving to an app-based model, which everybody sees as it. The industry was on board with that, right? The FCC had two choices here. They could do a choice that the copyright industry and the cable industry and the rest of the video providers were on board with and willing to do, which would eliminate the box for all practical purposes, okay? Or do this other approach that didn't, which is probably a violation of copyright law. It's very complex and is going to experience significant resistance. Okay? And the FCC is always saying the reason cable card didn't work is because of significant resistance to it by the industry. Well, what the heck do you think they're going to do now? Not only are they doing it, the cable industry, but the copyright people are going to go in and do it. I mean, what if the copyright industry says you can't give this information to a third party? You can't. Okay. What is the FCC's program going to do? Mandate that you then give it to a third party as a video provider? I mean, is that really legal to do that? I don't think it is. So you're going to run into that. On the other hand, we could have just gone the chairman could have gone the other route and done it. But at a time when we're trying to just eliminate the set-top box, if you read the NPRM, it's almost like, oh, whoa, we can't eliminate the set-top box, right? Because the statute says I have to have a market for a set-top box. So I'm going to force you to keep it so that we can have competition in it, which is just a crazy idea.
You referenced the cable card. What was that?
The cable card is back the first time they did this was a total disaster, a total failure. They had a security card, basically. The cable signal comes in from the head end, leaves the head end, it's scrambled, you don't know what's there. It hits the set-top box and it gets de-scrambled and the TV can see it, right? What they decided was, well, we can pull out this security piece of it, right, and move it around to different boxes. Okay, so then you could actually have a TV even that had a slot in it, and you could slide this card in there, and it would de-scramble the signal. Okay, and you could buy the little card, and everything would be fine. Go get your market box, from the store, and plug this thing in. It was a mess. Nobody bought the thing. I think there may be 500,000 of the things were ever put into service. People just quit making the technology, really, because consumers just really aren't that interested in it. They don't want. They could buy a cable modem, and they just don't. I mean, you can buy a cable modem for $60, and they choose instead to rent it for $4 or $5 a month. it's pretty obvious that they're really not that keen on that. But that cost billions of dollars to implement that program. Nothing came of it. It was a disaster, and the FCC admits it's a disaster. And this is going to be a disaster too. This is the FCC's third try. I mean, the dog returns to its vomit, right, as the scripture says. And the FCC is coming right back into this almost. You read the NPRM, you think this. No wonder the Soviet Union failed. You know, you look at all this complexity, you think this is never going to work. And then the copyright industry comes in and puts up a fence, and that's going to be the end of it.
Well, we'll have a fight on copyright, but the copyright holders would like, when I buy a book, they want to charge me every time I read it. And they certainly don't want me to allow me to read it to a room full of kids. Boy, they want to get a quarter for every kid that listens to that book. That's the model they like. That's the model they want here, instead of recovering their costs in the sale of the book, or in this case, in the monthly subscription fee they get back from the cable operators. So they want to have a copyright fight. Let's have a copyright fight in the courts. We've had, as I said, the home recorder, the MP3 player, file sharing. We've had those fights, and the world has moved on. Technology has moved on. The fact that they had a way, they said, look, let's get rid of the set-top boxes this way. It was the way to preserve their bilateral monopoly, right? Cable guys would still have the power to control the signal. Broadcasters would have total control of the signal, and there'd be no competition in that space. They define the way the programs come through. They define the way you search through the programs. I think, and that's exactly what AT&T said about the telephone. It's exactly the same argument. If you plug it in, it's going to blow the system up. And the answer is that it's just the way, it's the wall they put up to defend their market power. And the commission has looked at the statute. They say we've come 20 years later. We do things in software now. And so the cable card involved a physical thing. And actually, some people succeeded with cable cards. I believe TiVo uses cable cards. But we no longer have that. So we have this new flexibility about how to do it. And we can control these interfaces. And that's a much more efficient way to do it. And so we can have security, fair protection of copyright, and also competition. And that's what we as consumers, we care most about, getting some competition in this space.
Well, I think that was a gross misstatement of the copyright industry's take on books. They've never tried to charge me for reading it to my children, and we've read the same books many times. But the question is there such thing? I mean, this is fundamental. Is there such thing as a market for set-top boxes? Really? Or is it just part of the network? Now, we can draw regulatory distinctions at the house and say the cable network ends at the NID outside your house and then all the inside stuff is yours, but that's just an artificial regulatory distinction. Okay? Is that thing separate and apart from the network? And it's really not. The other thing is that now we've actually got a realistic possibility to move to a software-based solution to this and get rid of the thing altogether. But that's not good enough for some reason for the FCC, and I think the reason's pretty obvious. That's a very valuable piece of information that traverses that cable wire and comes into somebody's house, particularly when you know what they're watching and what they're not. There's a huge opportunity to monetize, okay? And that the FCC is not going to let that go. Okay, they're going to let somebody else in there, which of course is the problem the copyright industry people have, because they should be able to charge when somebody makes money with their product. There's nothing illegal or wrong-headed about that. It is their property, okay? There is a software solution that can be implemented here. Why is that not good enough? Why can't we get rid of the set-top box altogether? I already have. I got rid of 2 cable boxes because Charter Communications actually provides an app for me that I can use on Roku. Why is that not good enough?
Look,
Let's get the next question from Lydia Bayou.
If you expose the API on that software solution to other people, I'd be fine with it.
That's not what the FCC is saying to do. Though.
Well, they rejected, but you guys didn't offer it.
They rejected it.
But you didn't offer
They
it.
did offer it.
You did not offer an open interface.
I don't know. I don't offer anything. I don't provide cable service.
They did not offer an open interface.
The D-Stack report said you can have. Here's my app. You hit on open your Roku box, which is a competitive business. Hit on the Comcast app and watch whatever you want. They said they can do that.
You still have to get the permission of the cable operator, and there is no business.
What you
Let's
cannot
get
do
Lydia Bayou in here
is
from
manipulate
Bloomberg.
the signal. That's what you can't do. That's what the FCC wants to do, is to be able to manipulate and reorganize the signal.
So here's a question to follow up again and beat the copyright drum a little bit more, but one of the most criticized aspects of this proposed rule is that it is not clear how copyright holders would be able to enforce that copyright if a third party were to either change the program's neighborhood where it sits in relation to other channels, or layer certain types of content, say non-family friendly content on top of a Disney program that Disney might not like, and that they enforce through their contracts. So could you describe a little bit about what the FCC has proposed in terms of, it sounds like a self-certification regime, and how that wouldn't work? Because when the FCC says, well, if there's a violation, a pay TV provider can choose to brick or turn off the device, but the cable industry, the pay TV industry has said, well, that ultimately harms the consumers. So for them, that's not a solution.
Well, the point is that the FCC has laid out a program where you have to have permissionless innovation. If I have to ask the cable operators whether I can do something, you know they're going to make my life miserable. They've been doing that for 50 years. So here's a system, and we use this for Wi-Fi, for all those cell phones in your pocket that have a Wi-Fi in it. They had a simple certification procedure where the device was intended to do certain things, and they would certify that. And you know what? The cable guys and the broadcasters will know pretty quickly if someone is violating those obligations. And they have given the ability of the cable operator to say, if you can show, if you understand, if you see that they're violating those obligations, you can turn them off. So there's the enforcement mechanism. But if you have to have permission of the cable operator before you can get to the customer, you're doomed. And so we have to cut through that. We cut through that by giving them the protections of, if you see something that you think violates our rules, you can stop it, and then we'll litigate it. Well, you know, the copyright holders are clearly willing to litigate on their side. So that's the mechanism. Innovation first, litigation later.
But does that not harm consumers? Because a consumer would be more likely to hold their pay TV provider, the one they give the money to, responsible, even if the choke point was at the app or device, the third party.
If the consumer will be harmed if the consumer really wanted that to happen. And one suspects a lot of consumers would complain in Disney's case, right? They're not shy about sending the FCC letters when they see stuff they don't like, all right? So the Disney case, if someone puts something on top of a kid's show, the FCC will hear about that in the blink of an eye. And the cable operator will be authorized to stop that in the blink of an eye. And then we will sort the facts out, right? But the point is that, so I don't see the harm in allowing the innovation and competition to take place first, and then let's see if there are abuses. We've had the cable card, and it hasn't been as popular as we had hoped, but they've been out there for a while, and you don't have a boatload of complaints about it. The only people who complained about it were the copyright holders who lost a stream of income that if they had been smart enough, they might have been able to capture. So that's what this is about, capturing streams of income and making up horror stories that are supposed to scare somebody into not allowing open competition.
That's exactly what it's about. Capturing income from somebody else's property. That's exactly what this is about, and doing it without having to compensate them at all. I mean, if you really break it down, that's what it's about. But I think your question really drives the point home as to why the box market looks like it does today, or the box looks like it does today. These are very complex contracts between distributors and copyright owners. And the copyright is a right. This is something they own. It is property. Okay? These are very complex contracts. If I don't know how that signal is being treated at all times throughout the entire chain, then I don't have the confidence that it's being treated properly. That's really what it's about. That's why you see it look like it does, because you really have to maintain very tight control. How in the world is either the copyright industry or the cable industry gonna know if somebody is distributing boxes over eBay that allow you to do things you shouldn't be able to do? Like plug a USB thumb drive in the back of the thing and copy an entire movie to post on the internet. How are they going to know? Are they going to put every single person inside somebody's house? I mean, God knows what will come out of China that can translate this stuff. I mean, and you can imagine this wonderful world where all this stuff gets sorted out, but somebody's going to figure out a way around it. That's why the thing is closed like it is. And you see this underlying everything. Everything, open is good, closed is bad. That's not true. Some things are better closed, some things are better open. And the market is pretty darn good at sorting out which is which.
We haven't had a chance to have a market. I believe in markets. I don't believe in monopolies.
It is a
He
market.
believes in monopolies. Control, control, control. The copyright holders want to hold everything you touch and everything you do. There is no fair use to them. They want to say, nope, you can't use it that way. So for us, every time we've opened one of these markets, you go back for 50 years from the Carter phone where we let people plug a modem into the telephone network. Every time we open one of those bottlenecks, we get good competition, we get consumer-friendly choice, and the industry moves on. Now, sometimes the industry has to restructure. The music industry has restructured. Americans listen to more music today at 1/3 the price than they did 20 years ago, because they hated singles. That's exactly what these guys, they don't want you to listen to singles. They wanted you to buy albums, so you couldn't buy a single. That's exactly what they want to do with the video. We want this space to be open. We believe in competition. And we don't believe in this control.
Show me a monopoly in this business. Where is a monopoly in this business?
Set-top boxes don't
No,
call
no, no,
monopoly.
no,
We
no,
have
no.
time for one more question. Let's get Lydia
99%.
Bayud. She's the only one who's not jumping in at this table. She's the only polite one.
So neither of you have really directly addressed one of the other big issues related to this proceeding, and this is the idea that tech companies would be able to capture the sort of consumer information and develop very tailored, very detailed profiles of your behaviors and combine that, if in the case of a Google or an Apple or an Amazon, with all the other information that they have on you and then sell that and monetize that. Do you view that as any sort of problem? Is that just the nature that the marketplace is heading in?
The FCC has a proceeding on privacy ongoing, where
But
they
not
are
for
looking
edge
at
providers.
what?
Not for edge
Well, but
providers.
let's be clear. The FCC has an authority over communications providers. They don't have authority over edge providers. And I guarantee you, the minute I say the FCC should regulate the internet, he'll be screaming like crazy. So the FCC doesn't have the authority to regulate. But the interesting thing is that there is a choke point here that is really, really potent. So when I buy something from Netflix, Netflix knows what I'm doing. Netflix doesn't know when I go over here and buy something from you, because they're not part of that transaction. But the telephone, the communications network is. So all of those signals pass through the hands of the network operator. So that network operator has the greatest potential to abuse that information. When Netflix does it, they have to go out and find it someplace else. It all comes through the hands of the telephone company. And that is the great threat to privacy. And that is what the FCC is working on. I think those privacy issues can and will be dealt with in that other proceeding. There may be other privacy issues under other sections of Title III and Title VI, which govern the stream of video. But those are separate privacy issues. But the biggest threat to privacy is the guy who sees everything I do. And that's what the FCC is addressing.
Final word, George Ford.
I disagree. I have talked about that today. That is the whole basis of this, is getting to that information, to monetize that information. That is the only reason. You're not going to make money selling little boxes. That is the only reason this is going on, is because the FCC is going to allow edge providers to monetize people's viewing habits. That's it. That's it. Underneath it all, there it is. Everything else is a distraction.
George Ford is a chief economist for the Phoenix Center for Advanced Legal and Economic Public Policy Studies. Formerly worked at the FCC in the Cable Bureau. And Mark Cooper is the research director for the Consumer Federation of America. And he is also a fellow at Stanford Law School Center for Internet and Society. Lydia Bayud is with Bloomberg BNA. This is the Communicators.
Thank you, Peter.